Good morning once again. You would open your Bible to the book of Daniel, chapter 2. This morning we're going to be in verses 31 to 49. Daniel 2, 31 to 49. The title of the sermon this morning is Feet of Clay. Feet of Clay. I know it's a little bit unusual, the title, but it comes from the text, and you'll see that as we read through it. So this morning, I want to read the text, open us in a word of prayer, and we will have a look at exposition of the text and then get to application. So let's read the text all together. If you'll follow along in your copy of God's Word, Daniel 2, beginning in verse 31. You saw, O king, and behold, a great image. This image, mighty and of exceeding brightness, stood before you, and its appearance was frightening. The head of this image was of fine gold, its chest and arms of silver, its middle and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. As you looked, a stone was cut out by no human hand, and it struck the image on its feet of iron and clay and broke them in pieces. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold all together were broken in pieces and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors. And the wind carried them away so that not a trace of them could be found. But the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. This was the dream. Now we will tell the king its interpretation. You, O king, the king of kings, to whom the God of heaven has given the kingdom, the power, and the might, and the glory, and into whose hand he has given, wherever they dwell, the children of man, the beasts of the field, and the birds of the heaven, making you rule over them all. You are the head of gold. Another kingdom inferior to you shall arise after you, and yet a third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over all the earth. And there shall be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, because iron breaks to pieces and shatters all things. And like iron that crushes, it shall break and crush all these. And as you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, it shall be a divided kingdom. But some of the firmness of iron shall be in it, just as you saw iron mixed with the soft clay. And as the toes of feet were partly iron and partly clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly brittle. As you saw the iron mixed with soft clay, so they will mix with one another in marriage, but they will not hold together, just as iron does not mix with clay. And in the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that shall never be destroyed, nor shall the kingdom be left to another people. It shall break in pieces all these kingdoms and bring them to an end, and it shall stand forever. Just as you saw that a stone was cut from a mountain by no human hand, and that it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold. A great God has made known to the king what shall be after this. The dream is certain, and its interpretation sure. Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell on his face, paid homage to Daniel, and commanded that an offering and incense be offered up to him. The king answered and said to Daniel, truly your God is God of gods and Lord of kings and a revealer of mysteries, for you have been able to reveal this mystery. Then the king gave Daniel high honors and many great gifts, and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon and chief prefect over all the wise men of Babylon. Daniel made a request of the king, and he appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon. But Daniel remained at the king's court. If you will, pray with me. Lord, I pray now that you would work the supernatural miracle of opening our eyes to see you. God, if there's anybody here who has never seen you, whose eyes have never been opened before, I pray right now, God, that you would open their eyes as your word is preached, and that they would see you, see your son, Jesus Christ, sitting on the throne for the very first time. And that when they see him, they would love him. See him in all his glory. God, I pray that you would open our eyes this morning. And God, for those of us who have had our eyes opened, I pray, God, that you would continue to open them and to cast our vision upon him, that we would see the King, the one and only King who is King of kings and Lord of lords. Cause our eyes to look upon him this morning, Lord. I pray in his name. Amen. Most of us, if not all of us, have heard the phrase Achilles heel before. That phrase means it's a weakness in spite of overall strength, which can lead to a downfall, right? You could say a team's defense is their Achilles heel. That'd be a bad Achilles heel. But a close relative to this phrase is feet of clay. You may have heard that phrase before. It's actually a phrase that originates from the book of Daniel. It originates from this chapter. What does that mean, feet of clay? It's an idiom used to refer to a weakness or character flaw, especially in people of prominence and power. An entity with feet of clay may appear powerful and unstoppable, but they cannot support their splendor and will easily be knocked over. One thing that we find out in life, one way or another, is that we all have feet of clay. Every one of us. This morning we're going to see that Babylon is a kingdom of gold, and its leader, Nebuchadnezzar, wears a crown of gold. The only problem is that he has feet of clay, like we all do. This morning, we're jumping right into the middle of a story. And so let me give the context. If you haven't been with us the past few weeks, we've been going through Daniel. Let me give us the context, so bring us up to speed so you know where we're at. I'll give exposition of the text, and then I'll give application. Here's the context. Nebuchadnezzar is king of Babylon. One night he has a dream, and his spirit is troubled. He calls all the wise men together, has a meeting, and he tells them, you must tell me the interpretation of my dream and the content of my dream. Now, none of them can do this. Nobody can do this. He gets furious at this, and he orders all of them to be put to death. When they come to kill Daniel and his 3 friends, who are part of the wise men, Daniel pleads with the king to give him an appointment that he may tell the king his dream and the interpretation. That night, Daniel and his 3 friends pray, and they seek mercy from God, and God has mercy on them. He reveals the dream to Daniel. Daniel goes into the king, and the king asks him, he says, are you able to make known to me the interpretation of my dream? And Daniel quite frankly says, no, I am not. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. And this morning, we're going to get to the content of the dream and its interpretation. So that's where we pick up this morning. We're going to start with the exposition of the text. Let's start off, I'll do it section by section. Let's start off with verses 31 to 33. You saw, O king, and behold, a great image. This image, mighty and of exceeding brightness, stood before you, and its appearance was frightening. The head of this image was of fine gold, its chest and arms of silver, its middle and thighs of bronze, and its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. So I want you to notice the aspects of this dream. There is an image. Daniel describes this image as mighty, exceeding brightness, and frightening. This image is made up of 5 sections, 5 body sections, and 5 metals. Number 1, a head of gold. Number 2, chest and arms of silver. 3, a middle and thighs of bronze. 4, legs of iron. And 5, feet of iron and clay. Now notice with each of those parts, they become less valuable and less impressive. Now, each of those sections, each of those metals, I believe personally, is symbolic for something. And I hope to show you that in a minute, though some people don't think they are. I think they are. And I hope to show you that in a minute. Let's look at verse 34 to 35. As you looked, a stone was cut out by no human hand, and it struck the image on its feet of clay, and it broke them in pieces. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold all together were broken in pieces and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away so that not a trace of them could be found. But the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. So now, in addition to this great image, in his dream there is a stone. And this is no ordinary stone. This stone is not cut out by any human hand, meaning something supernatural cut out this stone. The stone strikes the image on its feet that are made of iron and clay, and it breaks the image's feet. Now, like all humans and all animals and all structures, if you take out something's foundation, it comes crumbling down. So the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, the gold, they all come crashing down because of this stone. The image is reduced to shattered pieces, and they are so small that they become like the chaff of the summer threshing floors. What does that mean? Chaff is the husk of either corn or wheat. If there's a seed inside, the farmer will break this open. The thresher would separate them. He would throw it up into the air, and the wind would drive away the light husk, and the seed would fall down to the ground. The wind carries them away, so not a trace of them can be found. Now notice, this stone has turned gold, silver, bronze, iron, even iron into chaff. Now what happened to the stone? It became a great mountain. It filled the whole earth. Look at verse 36 to 38. This was the dream. Now we will tell the king its interpretation. You, O king, the king of kings, to whom the God of heaven has given the kingdom, the power and the might and the glory, and into whose hand he has given wherever they dwell the children of man, the beasts of the field and the birds of the heaven, making you rule over them all. You are the head of gold. Daniel says to Nebuchadnezzar, I have told you the content of your dream. That's what you asked me to do. I have told you the content. Now we will tell you the interpretation. Notice we. Who is we? Probably him and God. That's my guess. He says, the head of gold, that is you, O king. I imagine that made Nebuchadnezzar feel pretty good. It's like, yeah, I'm the head of gold. I want you to notice, though, how Daniel prefaces this interpretation. 5 prefaces that he gives. Number 1, Nebuchadnezzar may be the king of kings, but notice he has been given this kingdom. Daniel says, you have been given this. You, O king, the king of kings, meaning you are the greatest of all kings, but you have been given this kingdom. Kings don't like to be thought of as having been given something. Kings conquer. Kings take. But Daniel says, you have been given this kingdom, O king. By who? Who was it given to? 2. Daniel points Nebuchadnezzar to the God of heaven. The same God who gave this mystery to the king, the same God who gave Daniel revealed the mystery to Daniel, is the same God who gave you this kingdom, Nebuchadnezzar. Number 3, Daniel says, not only is the kingdom given, but so is the power and the might and the glory. In other words, it wasn't as though God gave Nebuchadnezzar the kingdom and then Nebuchadnezzar built it up of his own accord. That God gave him the kingdom. Nebuchadnezzar, through all of his hard work, he earned for himself power and might and glory. No, God gave him all the power and the might and the glory. 4, Daniel repeats that God has given this to him. In verse 38, he says, into whose hand he has given. So the kingdom is given. The power, the might, and the glory is given. And so are the children of man, the beasts of the fields, and the birds of heaven. All of it has been given to Nebuchadnezzar. And number 5, making you rule over them. That literally probably translates to causing you to rule over them. Remember, Daniel said in verse 21, he removes kings and he sets up kings. So before Daniel reveals the dream, Daniel takes this opportunity to reveal the dream giver. That's the important part. Daniel says, before you know this dream, O king, I want to tell you about the dream giver. Look at verse 39 to 43. Another kingdom inferior to you shall arise after you, and yet a third kingdom of bronze which shall rule over all the earth. And there shall be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, because iron breaks to pieces and shatters all things. And like iron that crushes, it shall break and crush all these. And as you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, it shall be a divided kingdom. But some of the firmness of iron shall be in it, just as you saw iron mixed with the soft clay. And as the toes of the feet were partly iron and partly clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly brittle. And as you saw the iron mixed with soft clay, so they will mix with one another in marriage, but they will not hold together, just as iron does not mix with clay. Now let me say at the forefront, there is tremendous disagreement among scholars over what these sections and metals are symbolic for, if anything at all. I'm going to give my best interpretation. I'm going to spare you all of the pages and pages. Like 10 years ago, I would have given that all to you. I've learned, I've wised up. I'm going to give you my best interpretation based on my study. You might interpret it differently, and your study Bible may interpret it differently. 5 sections, 5 metals. Here they are. Number 1, head of gold. Now, we know that this is Nebuchadnezzar and Babylon because Daniel says so. There's no disagreement about that. Daniel clearly says, that's you. You are the head of gold. Babylon and Nebuchadnezzar are the head of gold. Nebuchadnezzar ruled from 605 BC to 539 BC. He says, another kingdom after you that is inferior to you shall arise. This is number 2, the chest and arms of silver. This is most likely the Medo-Persian Empire led by Cyrus the Great. Cyrus the Great rules from 539 BC to Cyrus doesn't rule that long. The Persian Empire is from 539 BC to 331 BC. After that, a third kingdom shall rule over all the earth. This is number 3, the middle and thighs of bronze. This is most likely the Greek Empire led by Alexander the Great. The Greek Empire lasted from 331 BC to 146 BC. Now, we know that Alexander conquered the known world from historically. And that matches with what we see here. After that, there'll be a fourth kingdom, legs of iron. This would be the Roman Empire. Now, we know that Rome ruled with an iron hand. They crushed anybody who resisted them. That's how they became so powerful. They ruled from 146 BC all the way to 476 AD. And then there is possibly a fifth kingdom, depending on how you interpret this. There's possibly a fifth kingdom, 5, which is feet of iron and clay. Now, Daniel gives 3 descriptions to this kingdom. A, he says it will be a divided kingdom. B, it shall be partly strong and partly brittle. And C, he says they will mix with one another in marriage, but they will not hold together, just as iron and clay do not hold together. Right? You put iron and clay, they don't bond together. They don't mix well together. The most scholarly disagreement occurs on this last kingdom. The 2 main theories are this. A, this is either the latter Roman Empire that divided up into East and West. The Roman Empire eventually divided up into an East and West. So this, if that's true, this would mean that there's actually 4 kingdoms, not 5. Rome is the 4th and the 5th. It's just all one. It's just the latter Roman Empire. Or B, Daniel Miller, who is a solid commentator, writes this. Shortly before the second coming of Christ, 10, a literal or symbolic number of kingdoms or nations of unequal strength will unite to form a coalition that will rise out of the ruins of the ancient Roman Empire, and the Antichrist will come from this empire. Now, which of the 2? It's up to you. I lean more towards A. I don't buy Daniel Miller's theory. He's a premillennial dispensationalist. I don't happen to be a premillennial dispensationalist. It's okay if you are. I lean more towards A, and only because Old Testament prophecy generally does not deal with prophecy between Christ's first and second advents. Old Testament prophecy generally deals with the first advent, not the second. So I think that there's 4 kingdoms, not 5. That the 4th one means that it is the Roman Empire but it eventually becomes kind of a very divided empire. We know historically that Rome did become a divided empire, and it led to their downfall. Verses 44 to 45. And in those days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that shall never be destroyed, nor shall the kingdom be left to another people. It shall break in pieces all these kingdoms and bring them to an end, and it shall stand forever. Just as you saw that a stone was cut out from a mountain by no human hand, and that it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold. A great God has made known to the king what shall be after this. The dream is certain, and its interpretation sure. Daniel says there is one more kingdom. And he gives this kingdom 5 descriptions. Number 1, the God of heaven sets up this kingdom. Number 2, it shall never be destroyed. Number 3, it will not be left to another people. Number 4, it will break into pieces the previous kingdoms and bring them to an end. And number 5, it will stand forever. Now, what kingdom is this? What kingdom can never be destroyed? What kingdom will stand forever? And behold, you will conceive in your womb and bear a son. And you shall call his name Jesus. He will be great and will be called the Son of the Most High. And the Lord God will give to him the throne of his father David, and he will reign over the house of Jacob forever, and of his kingdom there will be no end. Luke 1, 31 to 33. This stone that was cut out of a mountain by no human hand is none other than Jesus Christ himself. Daniel takes the opportunity to testify to God one more time. Notice how he bookends this section. He starts off with testifying to God of heaven in verse 37. And he concludes with testifying to this great God in verse 45. He bookends his speech to Nebuchadnezzar, testifying to the God of heaven. And Daniel continues to humble himself. He does not take credit for this interpretation. Now, you can only imagine if you could do this, the temptation to take credit for this would be enormous. But he doesn't. Daniel says, a great God has made known this to the king. Not I, but a great God. The dream is certain. Its interpretation is sure. How? Why? Because the God of heaven has revealed it. Look at verse 46 to 47. Then Nebuchadnezzar fell upon his face, paid homage to Daniel, commanded that an offering and incense be offered up to him. The king answered and said to Daniel, truly, your God is God of gods and Lord of kings and a revealer of mysteries, for you have been able to reveal this mystery. Now it's clear from what Nebuchadnezzar does right here, his actions, that Daniel not only had the correct interpretation of the dream, but he also knew the content of the dream. Because Nebuchadnezzar confirms that. Nebuchadnezzar has 3 responses to this revelation. A, he fell upon his face. Kings don't fall upon their faces, especially not in the presence of a 17-year-old Judean boy. The king's subjects fall upon their faces. B, he paid homage to Daniel. That word homage there, it means to show reverence to deity or perceived deity. C, he commanded that an offering and incense be offered up to him. Now, we're not sure if that means he actually is trying to worship Daniel here. It could be, though, that he's simply doing this because he sees Daniel as a representation of his God. And that would be kind of common, kind of like how we give gifts to ambassadors and so forth. And then Nebuchadnezzar gives 3 descriptions about Daniel's God. A, he says, truly, your God is God of gods. B, he is the Lord of kings. And C, he is the revealer of mysteries. Now, don't take this statement as Nebuchadnezzar placing his faith in God and being saved. Because we'll see in the next chapter, that is far from the truth. Nebuchadnezzar is simply acknowledging what is undeniably true. That's all he's doing. He's acknowledging the truth. Look at verse 48 to 49. Then the king gave Daniel high honors and many great gifts and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon and chief prefect over all the wise men of Babylon. Daniel made a request of the king, and he appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon. But Daniel remained at the king's court. Nebuchadnezzar said in verse 6, remember all the way back in verse 6, he said, look, if you show me the interpretation of my dream, you shall receive from me gifts and rewards and great honor. Nebuchadnezzar holds to his word. He gives Daniel 2 rewards. 1, high honors. 2, many great gifts. Now, we don't know what the great gifts were. But as far as the high honors, he gives Daniel 2 positions of power and influence. A, he made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon, which was the capital of the empire, kind of like being mayor of New York City. He made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon. And B, he made him chief prefect or governor over all the wise men of Babylon. The very same men whose lives that God had spared through them. I mean, it only makes sense to me. It's like, look, you owe me your life. Well, not God, you owe God your life, but Daniel's prefect over them. Daniel uses his newfound honor to make a request of the king, which he appears to grant. Daniel appoints his 3 friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He appoints them to be in charge of the affairs of the province of Babylon. So now there are 4 godly men in positions of power and influence in Babylon. We'll stop there for our exposition. Application of the text. I have 7 spiritual realities. 7 spiritual realities. Number 1, God does everything effortlessly. God does everything effortlessly. In Nebuchadnezzar's dream, God picks up this stone like it is a marble, and he rolls it at this mighty and frightening statue and breaks it into pieces. The pieces are so shattered, they become like the chaff of the summer threshing floors. The chaff is so light that the wind carries them away, and not a trace of them can be found. Now consider, these pieces, they were once mighty kingdoms. Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome. These pieces were once mighty kings and conquerors. Nebuchadnezzar, Cyrus the Great, Alexander the Great, all the Caesars. And God turns them all into chaff that is effortlessly carried by the wind. Daniel reminds us he changes times and seasons. He removes kings and he sets up kings. And God does it all effortlessly. God made the entire universe by simply speaking. He parted the Red Sea with the breath of his mouth. He draws out Leviathan with a fish hook. He opened a 90-year-old woman's womb. He simply touched Jacob and dislocated his hip. Jesus walked on water like it was concrete. He gave sight to the blind with some spit and some mud. He rose Lazarus from the dead with 3 simple words. God does everything effortlessly. When Moses questioned if God could feed all these people in the desert, God said he would feed them. And Moses is like, well, where are you going to get enough food for all these people? And God says to Moses, is the Lord's arm too short? Numbers 11:23. God's like, are you saying I have short arms? When Sarah laughed at the idea of having a child at the age of 90, God said, is anything too hard for the Lord? Brothers and sisters, not only can God give you everything you need, he can give it effortlessly. Not only can God defeat Whatever you need victory over in your life, he can win the battle effortlessly. He puts no effort into it. That is our God. Two, every Babylon is an opportunity to testify to the God of heaven. Every Babylon is an opportunity to testify to the God of heaven. 4 times in this chapter, Daniel testifies about the God of heaven. Verse 28, verse 37, verse 44, verse 45. Daniel testifies, he says that he is not able to reveal this dream, but there is a God in heaven who reveals dreams and mysteries. Daniel testifies that Nebuchadnezzar has been given the kingdom, the power, the might, and the glory. But this has all been given to him by the God of heaven. Daniel testifies about a kingdom that will never be destroyed. Why? Because it will be set up by the God of heaven. And Daniel says that your dream is certain. Its interpretation is sure. Why? Because a great God has made this known to you. Now, if there was ever a time that it would be understandable for someone to not testify, this would be it. I mean, consider all the factors. Daniel's young. He's perhaps 17 years old. And that's younger than all of you except for my boys and Gabe. He's young. He's a foreigner in a foreign land. He is not speaking his native language. His life has already been threatened. And if he says the wrong thing here, he might still die. If there was ever a time that it would be understandable for someone to not testify, this would be it. And yet Daniel 4 times testifies to the God of heaven. Friends, there are always dozens and dozens of excuses to not testify to God. I feel it. I'm not like just because I'm a pastor, it doesn't mean like I have a pastor button, I can just do it on demand. I feel it. I feel the excuses. I feel the temptation to not testify. Just like you. But these stories, they remind us we really have no excuse. We really have no excuse. If God will supply the strength to Daniel to testify to his greatness while in Babylon, then surely God will do the same for me. I am living in America. I speak the common language. I am exposed to training and teaching. I have everything that Daniel does not. If God will give Daniel the strength to do this, surely he will give it to me. Every Babylon is an opportunity to testify to the God of heaven. 3. A person cannot receive even one thing unless it is given him from heaven. John 3:27. A person cannot receive even one thing unless it is given to him from heaven. John 3:27. John's disciples came to him and they said, Rabbi, all the crowds are going to that guy across the river. And John says, listen, a person cannot receive even one thing unless it's given to him from heaven. All throughout this chapter, we see 2 words. We see give and reveal. Give and reveal. God giving, God revealing. We see the word give 4 times. Verse 21, verse 23, verse 37, verse 38. We see the word reveal 5 times. Verse 19, 22, 28, 29, 30. The best part of this comes in verses 37 to 38. Read that with me. 37, 38. You, O King, the King of Kings, to whom the God of heaven has given the kingdom, the power, and the might, and the glory, and to whose hand he has given wherever they dwell, the children of man, the beasts of the fields, and the birds of the heaven, making you rule over them all. You are the head of gold. Daniel reminds Nebuchadnezzar, everything you have, when you stand on your palace and you look out and you see all this, know this, O king, you have been given all of this. Now, our culture today is one that celebrates our achievements and boasts in them. We're about to watch a 4-hour spectacle of this. A 4-hour spectacle of boasting. And our achievements, what we have accomplished. We see it in athletes. We see it in politicians. We see it in CEOs. We even see it sometimes in pastors. But we are reminded that a person cannot receive even one thing unless it is given to him from heaven. 4. As human depravity increases, so does our longing for this stone. As human depravity increases, so does our longing for this stone. Daniel said in verse 39, another kingdom inferior to you shall arise after you. I think this is the Persian kingdom. I do. But that leaves the question of how was the Persian Empire inferior to the Babylonian? If you know your history, it wasn't inferior. The Persian Empire lasted longer than the Babylonian Empire, and it was larger than the Babylonian Empire. So how was it inferior? The best explanation I could find is put forward by John Calvin. Here's what John Calvin writes. We see then that Cyrus's kingdom, is not called inferior through having less splendor or opulence in human estimation, but because the general condition of the world was worse under the second monarchy, as men's vices and corruptions increase more and more. In other words, these metals may have become stronger. As you go down from gold to silver, the bronze, the metals become stronger, but they also become less valuable and therefore inferior. Why? Because human nature gets worse and worse, culminating with the Roman Empire crucifying the Son of God. The point that I want to make in this is that the world will often say that we are the most morally advanced, morally progressive society. Now, certainly that is true in certain areas. But on the whole, we have to be careful not to paint with broad strokes. Because human depravity generally gets worse, not better. Paul writes, evil people and imposters will become worse, deceiving and being deceived, 2 Timothy 3:13. Now, that question may rise, does that mean we should be pessimistic about the world? Does that mean that we should just, be like one of the old curmudgeon grandpa on the front porch being like, my days, we used to do this. Now these kids these days, they do this stuff. Is that what we should be like? No. Well, what should we be like? It means we should long for this stone. It means as human depravity increases, we should long for this stone. Our desire that this stone would come and end all earthly reign, all boasting, all kings, all dictators. We long for this stone to come and end it all. 5. You believe that God is one. You do well. Even the demons believe and shudder. James 2:19. You believe that God is one. You do well. Even the demons believe and shudder. James 2:19. There are many in the universal church who are saved under a profession of faith, much like Nebuchadnezzar's statement in verse 47. Truly, your God is God of gods and Lord of kings. That statement would be enough for many churches to admit a person into membership. But we know this is no profession of faith by Nebuchadnezzar. We will unequivocally see that in chapter 3. All that Nebuchadnezzar is doing in this statement is what James says in James 2:19. You believe that truly your God is God of gods and Lord of kings, and you do well. But even the demons believe this, and they shudder. I want to exhort you all. Listen to me, church family. I want to exhort you all. Don't settle for a Nebuchadnezzar type of faith, where you stand in awe of the power of God, but you don't seek the person of God. If you notice, Nebuchadnezzar doesn't ask any questions about Daniel's God. He didn't ask any questions. He doesn't appear to want to get to know Daniel's God. He is content to simply receive the revelation, but God remains a stranger to him. Friends, don't place your faith in God's power. God's power is not God. God is God. There are many people who come to church and they are saved under this assumption that if I stand in awe of God and I love who God is and I love what He can do for my life and I love that He is, and yes, man, He's the best. This God is the best. He is the true God. But God is a stranger. God is a stranger to them. Why? Because they don't seek the person. They don't want to know the person. Don't settle for that. Six, as the Father sent Jesus into the world, so Jesus has sent us into the world. John 17:18. As the Father sent Jesus into the world, so Jesus has sent us into the world. John 17:18. That night that God revealed the dream to Daniel, when he had the dream revealed, perhaps he knew right then and there why he was sent to Babylon. Like that night, he's like, now I know. Now it all makes sense. But what about his three friends? Yeah, they're like, I wasn't given a gift of dream interpretation. What is my role to play? Why am I here? I understand why Daniel's here. Why am I here? Why did God bring Daniel's three friends to Babylon? And we discover the answer in verse 49. Daniel appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon. So now there is not one, there are four men of God who are in positions of power and influence in the province of Babylon. We see from examples in Scripture that God sent Joseph into Pharaoh's courts. God sent Paul into the Areopagus. God sent Paul into Rome. And God sent not only Daniel, but also his three friends into the province of Babylon. Just as the Father has sent Jesus into the world, so Jesus has sent us into the world. We are not to become hermits or recluses or to remove ourselves from the evil Babylon of this world. We are to go into the world. Every position of authority, every influence, every status that you have, whether you are a mom interacting with your children's friends' parents, or whether you are a CEO interacting with hundreds of employees, Jesus has sent you into the world to be a living testimony to the great God of heaven. You've been sent. If you want a title, you're a missionary. I hereby declare you missionaries. You've been sent into this world to testify. And I don't declare you anything. Jesus declares you missionaries. 7, last point. The one who falls on this stone will be broken to pieces. And when it falls on anyone, it will crush him. Matthew 21:44. The one who falls on this stone will be broken to pieces. And when it falls on anyone, it will crush him. Matthew 21:44. Daniel says in verse 44 to 45, look what he says. In those days, and in the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that shall never be destroyed, nor shall the kingdom be left to another people. It shall break in pieces all these kingdoms and bring them to an end, and it shall stand forever. Just as you saw that a stone was cut up from a mountain by no human hand, and that it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold, a great God has made this known to the king of what shall be. I think it is very clear that this kingdom is the kingdom of God. And this stone is none other than Jesus Christ himself. Every kingdom, every king that comes into contact with this stone is broken, is crushed, is shattered. That's what Jesus does. Jesus said, you know that stone that the builders rejected? That's me. I'm the cornerstone. And the one who falls on this stone will be broken to pieces. And whenever it falls on anyone, it will crush him. In other words, meaning you can, either way, you can trip on the stone, and when you trip on it and you fall on it, you'll be broken to pieces. Or the stone can be above your head in an archway, and you can run into it, dislodge it, but in dislodging this stone, it'll fall on you and crush you. Either way, the point is the stone's not budging. The stone's not going to be affected. What happens to Nebuchadnezzar, what happens to Cyrus and Alexander and all the Caesars, happens to all of us. The greatest problem we have in this life is twofold. A, we want to be king. And B, there already is a king. This stone is the king, and his kingdom is forever. And everybody at some point, and if you're here this morning, you definitely are coming into contact with this stone. And it doesn't matter if we are gold. It doesn't matter if you're made of gold, you're made of silver, you're made of bronze. It doesn't matter if you are made of iron. If you're sitting here this morning thinking, I don't care what you say, preacher, you ain't converting me. You're right. You're absolutely right. I'm not. But there is a stone that can break your heart of stone. It does not matter if we are made of gold, silver, bronze, iron, because we all have feet of clay. All of us. Every one of us have feet of clay. And the one who falls on the stone will be broken to pieces, and when it falls on anyone, it will crush him. Friend, the best thing that can ever happen to your life is for Jesus to crush you. Shatter you. Devastate you. My mom used to pray that for me when I was younger. I was off running around, having a wild time, just enjoying life, living it up, loved it. My mom would pray. She said, Lord, crush him. That's a scary thing to pray. But she faithfully prayed. She said, Lord, devastate him. Do whatever it takes. Crush him. And he did. He did. The best thing that Jesus can ever do is to take out our self-made thrones that have feet of clay and to give us everlasting feet that stand upon the rock.